Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to take a look at Hahnemühle's budget watercolor journal, which is the one I'm holding here at the bottom, and compare it to their newer 100% cotton watercolor journal, which is the square one that you can see here. Here is a website I often use to buy my art supplies. This one is called Gerstecker, and it's a major art supply store in Germany. You can see they have a lot of products from Hahnemühle. Hahnemühle is a paper manufacturer that's been around since 1584, and according to Wikipedia, they have been producing their papers without animal products since 1965 already, and they're also covering all of their energy demands with renewable energy sources. They have a ton of different papers, including watercolor papers, acrylic papers, or paper for oils. And they have a lot of sketchbooks as well. The one I will talk about today are their watercolor book, which is this one here. They have a portrait format and a landscape format available, and they usually, here in Germany, they cost between 10 or 20 euros depending on the size. Only the very large one, this is an A4 size, is going to cost around 30 euros. The other one that I will show to you today is the 100% cotton one, which is the latest sketchbook, I believe. They also have tone sketchbooks and craft paper sketchbooks and bamboo sketchbooks. So this is the other one that I have. They have portrait format, landscape format, and this is a square format. And that's the one that I have. I believe I have this one here. And it costs around 30 euros to buy. Interestingly enough, if you compare them side by side, you will see that the cheaper one in the smallest size and the more expensive 100% cotton one in the smallest size only have a difference of about 4 euros in portrait and in landscape format. But of course, it scales up. So if you choose a size larger, the A5 size, then the difference is already 7 euros. And if you go one size even larger, A4 size, the difference is something like 17 euros. You will also notice that the cotton paper is slightly heavier. It's 250 grams per square meter. Both of these sketchbooks include 30 pages, or if you use the backside, 60 pages. But because the 100% cotton paper is heavier, it's thicker than the other watercolor journal. Let's look at the non-cotton watercolor journal first. It's got the elastic strap and it's very tight. It's left a little dent in my journal. It also has the little ribbon. And it's got the rooster on the back with the founding year of Hahnemühle. Here's what the paper grain looks like. The grain is the same on all pages. In terms of the quality of this journal, there are 2 pages where you can see a strange line through the paper, and it's not possible that this came from the pressure of the ribbon. Also, the stitching for the binding is sometimes off center. Let's take a look at some of the paintings I've done. This one here, I used masking tape around the edge and it came off very cleanly, but on the second one, it ripped the paper. I also did some testing on the back page of this journal and the masking pen came off without any problems. But you can see here that the paint behind the masking pen dried very unevenly. This is something that I noticed about this journal in general, but it's also kind of normal for most budget papers. If we take a look at the bubbles I painted before, you might notice that in some areas the background is relatively smooth, but in other areas you can clearly see some hard edges where the paint dried unevenly. This made me feel that I lacked a bit of control while I was working. Areas in the background that I wanted to be smooth ended up looking smudgy. But I noticed that you're able to lift quite well on this paper, so I could still make a lot of corrections. That's one of the things that bothered me the most while working with this journal was that the colors faded a lot when they dried. For the bubbles painting, I had to use my Viviva color sheets, those are inks, in order to get the dark background. And for the flower, those were my regular watercolor paints, and I felt that they faded quite a lot. So I painted some swatches on the back side and compared them to Hahnemühle's own Harmony paper. On the hot press surface, the colors seem to dry particularly vibrant to me. So when I compare them to this watercolor journal, I think the paints dry a bit lighter on this journal. I also swatched the Viviva color sheets here and they look quite vibrant to me. So I used them for painting in this journal. To be honest, I had to work really hard on this painting in order to get the smooth gradient for the background, and it still looks a bit streaky to me. But even the vibrant Viviva sheets dried much lighter, so that I had to use several applications of paint for the background. I also tried some Sumi-e inks out on this paper, and I painted a flower with them. But you can see that the background looks very muddy and uneven. Also, these are more opaque paints, and while I was working, it felt almost as if I was working with gouache on this paper because I could move them around so much. All in all, I would give this journal maybe 3 stars out of 5. I was not too satisfied with it while I was working with it. I think it would be suitable as a mixed media journal, but not if you want to use more advanced watercolor techniques. You might argue that this kind of behavior is normal for a non-cotton paper, but I'm comparing this journal to my other watercolor journal, the Viviva Inktober journal, which performs better in this regard, despite also being a non-cotton paper. So let's take a look at Hahnemühle's cotton Watercolor Journal now. It's a size 19.5 by 19.5, the square format. That's 7.7 inches by 7.7. And there are 60 pages, 250 GSM. It's got the elastic strap as well. And this one also left a little dent at the top. The edges are rounded and it has a black ribbon. The grain of the paper is the same on all pages. And in terms of the quality, this feels mostly better. The stitching is usually centered, but there's one page where you can tell that they've used glue in addition to the binding, and it's ripping a little. There's also a page where you can see a straight line through the paper for some reason. Also, there's a bump at the back where the rubber is attached, and this has left a mark on the second to last page. I also noticed an unusually dark mark while I was painting that I cannot explain. I did some more tests on the last page. The gradient beneath the masking pen definitely dried a lot more smoothly, but also quite light. I also attached some masking tape to test if it would rip the paper, and unfortunately it did a little bit. Once the masking pen had dried, it was really difficult to remove it, and I think I still didn't manage to get it all off. You can see there's little bits of blue left over. I also tested how you can layer on this paper, and it worked without problems, but I had a really hard time lifting paint. I could only lift with the help of a sponge called the Magic Eraser. Here is another failed lifting attempt. As for my color swatches, they look a little bit more vibrant on the cotton paper, but only for some colors. The good news is that erasing works very well, in particular with the kneaded eraser. All in all, it really depends what you want to paint. If you want a smooth gradient, then the cotton paper is the way to go. But if you want to use masking pens, then you might want to go with the budget paper. But if you use a lot of lifting in your paintings, then you might want to go with a different cotton paper. In general, I liked how the paint flowed on the cotton paper. It felt like I had a good amount of control, but it still wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, and the quality could be slightly better for a journal of this price point. But if you want to get a journal in a relatively small size, the price difference between the cotton and the non-cotton version is really not that big, so I would recommend getting the cotton one if you can. I will leave you with a speed painting on the cotton journal now. Thanks for watching and see you next time.